Now there's only 2 units in the armed forces, the Canadian regiment and the one they wish they were in it. So.
Oh, okay.
Oh boy. Okay, kids, we'll save that debate for another committee. I'm going to go ahead and commence the meeting. It is now 9:30. Before we proceed, we'll do a quick roll call to make sure we have at least 6 members present, and we have to maintain quorum. Kelly, can you do roll call, please?
Councillor Luloff,
Oh, I'm here.
Councillor Dudas,
Je suis ici.
Councillor El Shantiri,
Royal Canadian Regiment all the way. Yes.
Councillor Deans,
I'm here.
Councillor Fleury,
Good morning.
Councillor Menard. I saw him. Councillor Menard. I did see his name. Councillor Kitts.
Here.
Councillor DeRuse.
Here.
Councillor Hubley.
Here.
Vice Chair Leeper.
Good morning.
And Chair. You have quorum.
Present. Thanks a lot, Kel. Appreciate that. We have no regrets, no declarations of interest. Can I get the confirmation of minutes? Minutes 17, April 4th. Are these confirmed?
All right.
Thank you. I'm just going to go through the consent agenda here and see what we have. The first item is Summerall Boulevard Transit Priority Corridor Environmental Assessment Study. We have no presentations, no delegations, no correspondence on this one. Is this item carried?
I have a few questions, Mr. Chair, just to staff for clarification.
Okay, great. So we'll hold that item. Item number 2, the Intelligent Transportation and Connected Automobile Vehicle Updates 2021. This is a really exciting presentation we do have here. Quite excited about this. Ottawa should be proud, so that item will be held. Item number 3, always stop control at the intersection of Queen Mary and Vera Street. We have no presentations, delegations, or correspondence on this. Is this item carried?
Carried.
Okay.
Item number 4, speed reduction gateway zones in Lowertown, Sandy Hill, and Vanier. We do have one presenter, the delegation. Kel, is Aaron Cunningham in the room?
He just was promoted.
Great. So Aaron, I'm not sure if you can hear me. We have a bit of a lengthy presentation at item number 2 today. If this item is supported by committee, do you feel the need to speak today?
Okay.
So, oh, good. There you are, Aaron. So
Yeah.
If this item does carry, do you feel that you wish to speak today?
If it carries, no.
Great. So committee members on this item, is this item carried?
Carried.
Great.
Mr. Chair, would you indulge me in a few thank yous?
Yeah, absolutely. So the item is carried. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you, committee. I want to thank the city staff and the community, specifically Robert Charbonneau and Phil Landry. Just tremendous to work with on bringing this report forward and supporting our community. And I want to thank community groups. I know that in each of our community we put seasonal traffic calming measures, and obviously with the new gateway measures, they've helped us bring some more coordinated strategy. So I want to thank community groups for their engagement as well. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. And on that, we do have a quick technical amendment, and Vice Chair Leeper will read that.
My apologies. I'm just pulling it up.
Yeah, no worries. We'll get Kel to pull it up on the screen as well.
Yeah. So, yeah, with respect to the gateways, whereas the Transportation Services Department comment in Councillor Fleury's report on the speed reduction gateway zones in Lowertown, Sandy Hill, and Vanier references, just lost it, 6 supporting documents outlining the speed survey results for zones 1 through 6, which were unintentionally omitted from the report. Therefore, be it resolved, the Transportation Committee amend the Councillor's report to add supporting documents 1 to 6 as attached to this motion.
Great. And just all technical on that item. Is that item carried? Great. Thank you. Kel, we're satisfied on that one? Great. Going back to the agenda, the final item. Always stop control at the intersection of Sweetland Street and Osgood Street. Osgood Street, and it's in Vanier. Okay. On this item, there's no delegations.
Osgood is in Sandy Hill. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Oh, there we go. In Sandy Hill. Sorry, I saw in the Rideau Vanier area. Apologies. I just found it interesting. So on this item, is this item carried? Great, thank you.
Alright.
So we'll slide back up to item number 1. Councillor Fleury had a couple of comments or questions.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to staff. I just want some a bit of clarification. So there, at this committee, I believe it was maybe last time or the time before, we were all very excited to see the EA for the eastern portion of Montreal Road and Blair. I know Councillor Dudaz and Tierney and Councillor King were all engaged on that specific. I'm just curious to see how they all tie in. So we have the Montreal Road construction west of Saint Laurent. We have the EA east of Saint Laurent along Montreal Road. We have the reconstruction that's happened south of Innis on Saint Laurent. And can you maybe share with us kind of the game plan and how those are all being considered as one portion? I guess that wasn't clear to me in the report.
Yes, Chair. All of these environmental assessment studies are conducted through my service area. So there is some, the bigger plan of where everything, all completed studies become input to the next project that's up. So all of Montreal Road, that first section, the western section was approved. And for that work, it leads to the second section, which we will have a report to Transportation Committee later on this year with the final recommendations on that. And this is a newer study, north-south along Saint Laurent, and it will take into account all previous decisions and other road projects that would affect this study itself. As well as any other planning, because there's also the building better and revitalized neighborhood work that's underway along Saint Laurent, so that'll feed into this as well. So everything is linked.
Oh, that's great to hear. A question relating to future bus routes. So I know that both Ralston's community and my community have been working closely over the years to continue to improve transit and routing in the area. Will that be kind of intertwined in that? Because our community is working with OC Transpo on those, and I want to make sure as well that they're simultaneous, so that one is considered as a whole.
Yes, and we're all under the same department, Transportation Services, and so I work closely with my colleagues on that, on the operational aspect, to roll it into the planning work that we do in transportation planning.
Exciting. Thank you for clarity.
Okay.
Great. So on that item, is that item carried? Great. Thank you, everyone. Okay, great. We're on to item number 2, which is really exciting. We got a great presentation. Get comfy, folks. It's a bit of a lengthy one, but there's so much to be proud of here in this city about what we do. So at this time, we have Omar that's going to be giving us the presentation. So I'll turn the floor over to you guys.
Thank you, Chair, for that. And we're really pleased to be here today to give you an update on what we've been doing on the intelligent transportation system area, as well as connected and autonomous vehicles. So Omar Chowdhury's here. He's our project lead for all this area within our service area, and he's going to provide you with an update on that work. So I'll pass it over to Omar now. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Phil. So good morning, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of committee and council. As Phil said, I'm Omar Chowdhury. I'm project lead in transportation system management. And on behalf of my colleagues in traffic services, I'm really excited to provide you this update on the work that has been undertaken over the last couple of years in the connected and automated vehicles, so CAV, and ITS, or Intelligent Transportation System projects. So Kelly, if you can go to the next slide. So the first project I'd like to highlight is a project that you've heard about before. In previous updates, you would have heard more about the operational and maintenance cost savings that have been achieved as a result of reduced energy use, and how that's impacting the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. But from a technology standpoint, what's actually exciting to me is the opportunity that this asset actually provides us. One of the challenges we do face is the access to reliable power and communications capabilities. And there's a nascent industry that's sort of forming now about the sensors and tools that could be actually used to connect through these traffic or these street lights to be able to provide us access to sensors such as traffic speeds and so forth. And all of that information is connected through a wireless mesh network that enables the backhaul of that data to our communication center. Next slide, please. And so another project and another asset that we have certainly is the number of signs, physical assets like road safety features that are on our roads. And so in 2019, we began an effort to go through and start collecting an inventory of all of these assets around the city. So that work has been started. And as it stands now, we already have been able to create a posted speed limit layer that provides us access to all of the streets across our network, as well as develop an inventory of signs. And that information has been shared with both the road scoop and our traffic safety group. And what this project will ultimately allow us to do is have a better and more robust asset management application, and be able to also support more efficient maintenance operations into the future. This information, so where the speed limits are, where those speed limit changes, where are the stop signs and so forth, will be able to be used to support the auto industry in the connected and automated vehicles space. Kelly, next slide. And then another asset, of course, we have is our traffic signals. Across the city, we have about 1,200 of them. And so normally operations based on traffic and turn movements change throughout the day. And so we create signal timing plans that try to optimize the performance of the intersection based on that, the known or expected travel volumes at that time of the day. Our staff at the Traffic Operations Center are able to make adjustments to the signal timing plans based on when things happen, such as an incident or a road closure that may occur, and be able to adjust the timing of those plans. But this project actually started to look at how we could actually use computer AI and computer technology to be able to have those decisions made automatically and alleviate that effort from our staff, but that still actually allow them to override or manage that. And so this project started from 10th line through the Blackburn Hamlet bypass as phase 1. And so things like, a family day has a different travel volume than a normal Monday, for example. We were monitoring and observing that the system was actually making an appropriate decision as it needed to based on the volumes that it would see. So we've actually taken that as an extension. We extended that all the way from the Blackburn Hamlet bypass through to Saint Laurent Boulevard and found positive results. It was making the right decisions at the right time as what our staff would normally do. Next slide, please, Kelly. And so we're actually in the process now trying to implement this at another high volume corridor, which is Hunt Club Road between Riverside and Prince of Wales. And we are hoping to have this operational sometime in Q3. Next slide, please, Kelly. And then, of course, there's a number of things that happen behind the scenes that we've been undertaking. So one of the efforts is converting the system to move to a new platform, similar like when you have to move something from a Windows 7 to a Windows 10, there may be changes. We're in the process of doing that. And that'll also allow us provide us some additional security and operational benefits. As part of the road safety action plan that you heard about recently, or that was presented to committee recently, there's a couple of projects that are related to that. One is the joint PED mode. And so what we're doing is we're adding these other features or modes of operation for the signal so that they can actually operate in different kind of conditions and scenarios. And this would allow when a vehicle triggers the signal to change, that as long as it's not compromising the operational conditions, it would actually allow the pedestrian signal to be triggered. In addition to that, there's another one which has been talked about before, which is the amber lock, what we're calling the amber lock. And it's really to help reduce the occurrence of red reverts for cyclists. And essentially what's going to happen is that when the signal gets to close to the amber phase, if it still detects that there's a cyclist in the detection zone, it will actually follow through and go through the entire cycle. And then over the years, there's been a lot of changes in terms of how technology is implemented. So often in the past, you'd have a device in the vehicle, and then something at the roadside that would communicate. And that was used often for either emergency service preemption or transit preemption. And so we're looking at now, how can we use GPS information as the buses are all getting wired with GPS to be able to use that for preemption and transit priority. And then the last one, which is kind of more futuristic, I guess I'll say, or moving us towards the future, is the ability for the traffic control software to output what's called SPAT data. So that's signal, phase, and timing. And essentially what that's doing is it's a digital description of what's happening at the intersection, so that in the future supported connected and automated vehicles can actually understand what's happening and what is happening at the signal. So if Kelly, if you can go to the next slide. Our traffic operations staff, because I don't think any of us speak hexadecimal, what we've actually been able to do is create a visualization tool. So it's actually able to receive the information. And as you can see here, the colors are changing for the lanes through the intersection. And it's a little small, but there's a number inside that's showing, and that would be counting down as to how much time there's left in that phase or cycle. And the blue lines are just the description, what's known as the map data. And it's essentially where the center line of the road and how wide each of the roads or lanes are. And that includes cyclist lanes, pedestrian crosswalks, and so forth. And so being able to digitize this information and provide it into the car of the future, that car will know that there's a green light and it can pass, or it's a red light and it should not pass. And all that information right now through this project is being broadcast out by a technology that's called DSRC, or Dedicated Short Range Communication. And in the industry, there's also now a follow-on, which is called CV2X, which is essentially a 5G technology. And so this is currently operational at Terry Fox and March Road out in Kanata. And if Kelly, if you can go to the next slide. Associated with that project is the whole idea of how can we get information out to the car. So this project was a Transport Canada funded research project. We did one in 2017 and 2018 on Hunt Club Road for about 6 kilometers and 12 signals. But this one expanded it to a citywide project. And instead of using a local broadcast using DSRC, this one actually broadcasts out the information through a third party through the 4G regular cell network. And so what we did was we built this application, it ran on Android, that provides information in what's called GLOSA, or Green Light Optimized Speed Advisory. And essentially what it's trying to do is tell the car or tell the driver what is the optimal speed for them to get through on the next green light. And so in the example here at St. Patrick and Dalhousie, you'll see that the signals, both the through and left turn, are red right now. There's 7 seconds left before it's supposed to change. And the optimum speed to get to the signal when it turns green is either 10 or 15 kilometers an hour. And there are some buffers and so forth that I won't get into the technical, otherwise we could be here for an hour or two. So we ran through with 7 traffic management staff over 218 days worth of data collection, 24,000 kilometers of driving, and almost 30,000 signals driven through. And what we found was that we could actually achieve on average about a 5% savings in fuel. But we actually had one staff that was able to achieve a 14% savings in fuel. And the fuel savings is achieved because of the difference in reducing the variability in speed. So if you don't actually speed up and slow down as much, you're able to actually reduce the fuel. And if you want to remember your kinetic energy formula, it's basically the square of the speed. So if a double of speed is actually 4 times the amount of energy you require. And so that's where you can actually see the savings. And in discussions with the Federal Highway Administration down in the US, they actually have done some computer analysis that they think that the car of the future could maybe see up to 20 to 25% fuel savings if it actually is automating the speed adjustment. So Kelly, next slide, please. So we were really quite pleased. This project gave us, or we achieved 2 national awards. One is through the Transportation Association of Canada. The other for large municipalities, provinces, and the federal government through Intelligent Transportation Systems of Canada. And because you can't win them all, we received an honorable mention for the city's own Environmental Excellence Award in the internal category. And I've just actually learned just in the last week or so that we had submitted a paper to the US National Academy of Sciences, the Transportation Research Record, and in cooperation with Dr. Atakan at Carleton University, our paper is going to be published in that journal as well. So we're really quite excited about that. But we don't want to rest on our laurels. Winning a few is good, but let's keep the momentum going. And so we've been actually making some adjustments and modifications to that the screen that you saw there. So in a moment, I'll get Kelly to start the slides. But what you'll see is the original screen that you saw with the signal heads. The video starts just after the light has turned to green, but the car is stopped at the light, waiting to move forward. So Kelly, if you want to roll the clip. And so what you'll see now here is that we've changed it to a speedometer. And so what you're actually seeing is the green, yellow, red areas are actually the segment of the speeds recommended that you can actually travel to get through on green. And in a second, it'll switch from green, yellow, red to red, yellow, green. And that's because the signal up ahead is actually red, and you need to slow down in order to not to get to the signal too quickly. And so with that, Kelly, to the next slide, please. So we're actually in the process of looking at how we can actually start testing this new interface, testing it with other departments and branches, because what we want to understand is how does this technology and how do different driver use cases, if they're stopping frequently, if they have long trips, how can they actually achieve better savings? We want to understand that. And so we're working with fleet to sort of start to identify some new testers. And then added to that would be whether or not we can, I'll say, exclude the third party and actually get the data directly from ourselves. And as I was mentioning, there's some work on that process that we're undertaking. And then we want to start looking at what other user groups could actually benefit from this technology. Next slide, please, Kelly. So the last one that I'll talk about for intersections is the Kanata Smart Intersection. Now, this was we're working on this in partnership with Invest Ottawa. And what this site will do, which is Kanata and Terry Fox, is wired up to enable small and medium-sized businesses that are working with Area X.O and Invest Ottawa to install their equipment, provided that it's been safe and tested by our staff, and actually run it in a real-world environment. And that's certainly for an economic benefit to be able to help businesses and small businesses grow here in the city. But it also provides us with the first case view of what the technology is and what's possible out there. And so some of the equipment that's going to be out there will be able to record wind and precipitation, road conditions, so that we can know whether the road surface is wet or snow covered, is it starting to ice, and then other information such as travel times, speeds of vehicles, and so forth. And so we're hoping to launch this project soon. Unfortunately, COVID's made it a little bit of a challenge and to be able to run some proper testing, but we hope to do that soon. Kelly, next slide, please. And then speaking about Area X.O, Invest Ottawa provided an update to FedCo back in November, I believe it was. And Traffic Services has been working with Invest Ottawa to both support small businesses who want to deploy and test their equipment here in Ottawa, but also being able to provide access to infrastructure. So we've added 2 traffic lights, 3-way and a 4-way. We've provided bike lanes, signs, and so forth. Street lighting, and more recently, you can see on the right-hand side there, with cooperation from the rail construction program that had some surplus equipment, we were able to assist in providing a level rail crossing, which we do have a number of them across the city, and will provide us a good opportunity to do some testing there. Next slide, please, Kelly. And so it's not only small and medium-sized businesses that can actually test there, but we can test there ourselves. So on the left-hand side, you'll see a shuttle that was tested, and through the infrastructure that Invest Ottawa and Area X.O has, we're able to, for example, test using these mannequins to see whether or not the vehicles actually properly can recognize someone coming across and how it reacts to that. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see in 2019, our network modification group actually wanted to do some testing to get a better feel and understanding about maneuverability and turning radii of fire trucks. And we were able to use the facility for that. Next slide, please, Kelly. And so in speaking about shuttles, in 2019, we did our first pilot working with Area X.O. It was in the Marshes golf course, which was following our mantra of walk before you run. We wanted to run it in a safe and comfortable location and start to learn how these different technologies, LiDAR, radar, GPS, will handle different conditions. So as you can imagine on the golf course, it's a winding, wiggly road. We had to avoid some golfers and golf carts, but it provided us an understanding of how that sort of technology would work and allow us to start to move forward. So the next step, next slide, Kelly, was then in November of 2020, Invest Ottawa, through some funding from Transport Canada, led a pilot of a shuttle that you can see up on the top right-hand side there around Tunney's pasture. And all three organizations had different reasons for being able to do this. Transport Canada wanted to learn and develop some policy guidelines on how to run and test these things. Invest Ottawa certainly wanted to increase their expertise in running these sort of shuttles and pilots. And we wanted to understand how they operate in a more real world environment. So there's parking, bicyclists, pedestrians, crosswalks, and so forth. And over time, there was about 700 passengers that actually ran through the during this shuttle. And next slide, please, Kelly. And so we also talk about, I was just mentioning about interacting with the public, which was the first project really with the shuttles, but we're also interacting with public in how we manage and operate our roads. So one of the things, as I mentioned earlier, was that getting access to power and communications is a challenge for us. And so as we're leveraging the construction of LRT Stage 2 to actually put the necessary groundwork, so both power and fiber connections along the 174 corridor that we actually use to outfit with traffic counters, speed detection, increase our camera capability and visibility to be able to identify incidents, and then be able to start to put out dynamic message signs to be able to describe road conditions, lane blockage, and so forth. And that project will really start to feed into what is really a larger citywide strategy of providing this kind of similar infrastructure around elsewhere around the city. Kelly, next slide, please. But one of the ways that we have traditionally been interacting with the public is through our interactive traffic map. And that was originally built in 2007 and received some upgrades over time. But we've been undertaking an overhaul of that in the last couple of months. And so next slide, Kelly. To steal my thunder for the next time when we actually present and roll this out, this is a preview of the new traffic map. And some of the things from a visual standpoint that's been changed is we're moving over to the Esri GIS map, base map. And that's going to allow us to provide bilingual road names, which actually Google Maps doesn't provide across the entire city. It allows us to provide dynamic sizing to adjust for any types of screens, and it's also mobile friendly, and it'll have some additional improved accessibility components to it. So we look forward to launching a beta of this later on this summer, and then we'll run it for a number of months, receive feedback and comments from the public, make some changes, and roll it out officially, hopefully by the end of the year. And while visuals are great, there's a number of back-end improvements that we're undertaking, which will actually improve the flexibility and our capability of reporting things to the public. Next slide, please, Kelly. And so we're in the process of moving towards what I call a mobility-centric system. So instead of, right now we have the information in different places, we're wanting to centralize all of our incident, construction, and other event information. Be able to identify things based on priority of the impact to travelers, so that way they can see which ones are the most impactful to them. And other things like being able to better describe the days and hours of the day that an event might be happening. But maybe one of the more exciting ones is actually the enabling different traveler groups. So as you can imagine, something that impacts a cyclist doesn't actually maybe have the same impact on a driver. And similarly, someone who has mobility issues may be more interested in what's going on with the sidewalk. And if we can provide that information to allow them to not get into a place where they walk down a road and then realize that they can't cross at that location, or they'll have mobility challenges, we can actually address that by getting that information out. Next slide, please, Kelly. And then we're also involved in doing some testing and piloting of new technology. So one of the technologies is the bike detection feedback bollard. And that's been working with a third-party partnership. And it will essentially identify and let the cyclist know that the signal or the detection equipment has identified and recognized that they're there. And that way it provides a little bit of comfort, I'll say, or certainty that they are being recognized. And we're also in the process of, hopefully in Q3, being able to roll out an accessibility pedestrian system that will actually use a key fob and a mobile app to allow the pedestrian signal to be activated remotely or through a distance. Next slide, please, Kelly. And then on the traffic side of things, our traffic operations staff have been working with a startup based here in Ottawa that's actually allowing them to monitor travel times on various segments of roadway. And that's sort of an exciting opportunity because certainly providing travel time information for our local and arterials and so forth is something that's of value. But probably one of the things that's changing fastest in the industry is actually not related to traffic per se, but it's actually the computer vision technologies and what we would call at the edge computing. So now today, even on your own mobile phone, when you turn on your camera, you can actually have tools that will actually identify objects that it sees in its view. And instead of having to take the video, bringing it back to headquarters, running it through a giant processor to extract the information, it's able to just in real time identify, oh, there was a truck, there was a car, there was a person, and report that information back on a minute by minute basis so that we can actually track what's going on our roadways dynamically on the fly. And it's becoming cheaper and cheaper and easier to do. So next slide, Kelly. And that sort of takes me almost back full circle to the street lights that I talked about at the beginning. And we're looking at trying to do a pilot in the ByWard market. This is William and George, as you can see. And the device that you see there connects to the traffic, the street light, I should say, and is able to, in real time, count the number of either pedestrians, cyclists, vehicles, or actually the parking spot usage or availability. And we wanted to be able to test in a location. I live nearby, so even in a blizzard, I can throw on my white parka, run through the lights and see whether it actually sees me. And that opportunity is something that we want to be able to test over 4 seasons to really understand what this technology can do. There's very few places in the city that have this amount of traffic, pedestrians, cyclists, and so forth, all within such a tight stretch that we can actually test everything all together. And then Kelly, next slide, please. My final slide is with regards to all the stuff that you've heard today and seen today really stems from the 2012 Transportation System Management Action Plan and the process and the programs that were identified there. So starting this year, we're undertaking a new refresh of this that will identify future short, medium, and long-term projects. And that'll take into account all the work that's been done through the new official plan, the work that Vivi Chi's group is doing and the Transportation Master Plan, the Road Safety Action Plan work, and then also interaction with all of our colleagues in other departments who are working and are related to the movement of either people or goods. And we expect to be able to deliver this report in early 2023 to this committee. And with that, thank you very much. I lost track of how long I was going, but hopefully it wasn't too long. Thank you so much.
Wow, that was a great presentation. Wow, very, very good. First, we do have a couple of questions, but before I get to that, members of committee, if you haven't seen the Traffic Control Center, it's something you'll definitely want to see at some point. And post-COVID, when we get out of this, we can schedule some tours and check that place out. The amount of intelligence that we have in the city around this. Big thanks to Omar, to the team. On this one, we do have questions, so I'll go with Vice Chair Leeper, also the chair of our IT subcommittee, so he must be quite excited about this.
I am. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Omar. You know, this does put together a lot of things that I get really excited about. It's data, it's algorithms, it's big data, communications networks, maps, sensors. We need to build a more sustainable city, and technology is going to be a huge part of that. I have a couple of questions that are maybe a little bit philosophical in nature. This presentation, certainly the beginning of it focused a lot on technologies that are being developed for mitigating or improving the flow of private automobile traffic. And we could probably spend all day talking about how long is the private automobile going to be a focus for cities versus what we know we need to do, which is to focus on active transportation and mass public transit. I was struck, there was a slide that you showed of the Kanata Smart intersection. That was a big, wide intersection that was absolutely bereft of anything except vehicles. Philosophically, where is the pedestrian? Where is the bus? Where is the train? Where is the cyclist in the work that you're doing? How far down the path do we go of trying to make our networks more intelligent for private automobiles versus making it more intelligent for moving people? At what point do we have technology that compares the volume of pedestrians on a sidewalk versus the number of people who are driving down a block and saying we need to reduce speeds and reduce volumes of cars because the pedestrian demand is so high? Where is the pedestrian, the cyclist, the train, and the bus in all this?
Well, thank you, Vice Chair. That's a great question. I will say that industry has traditionally focused on the private automobile, but that doesn't mean that, the technology, for example, that I was showing you about being able to identify the number of people walking across the road and so forth, can't actually be applied for pedestrians and cyclists, for example. And then being able to use that data to be able to identify, for example, do we need bigger and wider sidewalks to allow pedestrians to travel and so forth? And part of it is really the lack of data. I would say, at least from my standpoint, I spent most of my career actually working down in the US, and so the road and the car is the big thing. But it doesn't provide a livable city. There's a number of great programs that I've seen on TVO and so forth about livable cities. And we want to certainly be able to collect information to be able to allow and make better decisions on how to support pedestrians and so forth. I'm not sure if that answers your question, and maybe Phil might want to chime in.
Thanks, Omar. Yeah, I think to your point, at this point where it's we're doing all this testing, but ultimately, like, the information that we gain from that can be applied to transit, for example, with buses. The smart shuttles that we're doing, the autonomous vehicles, and things like that. Again, the goal, and we're following and being in line and trying to be in line with the official plan, the transportation master plan, and I mean, if Phoebe wants to talk a bit about from the planning perspective, but our goal right now is to stay ahead of the curve, and we're very cognizant, and we've pushed to have some measures put in, like Omar talked a bit about today in the presentation, focused on pedestrians, focused on cyclists, because we know that that's where we want to go, especially to be a sustainable city. At the end of the day, we want to be at the ahead of the curve, and being able to deal with all the things that are coming at us versus being behind the times and trying to catch up. And that's what this program is allowing us to do, always with in mind the sustainability of our city.
I think there's a lot of money and energy and creativity that's being put into things like the software that will drive autonomous vehicles in a city. And my caution to the city is not to make assumptions that is going to be the sustainable solution to things like congestion, et cetera, and always be ensuring that as we develop new technology, as we develop new algorithms, we may have to chuck the private vehicle from a lot of those considerations altogether at some point. You know, let's make sure that we're developing the technology as neutrally as possible, anticipating you know, the shift that our official plan contemplates, for instance. The second question, Omar, is, and you alluded to it, the data that we're creating. We're creating a huge amount of data. How can we make that public for residents to use when they're doing, you know, citizen analyst type work around policy choices?
Yeah, so I guess I'll say a number of the data that we actually do provide is available through the open data portal that the city has. And that includes, for example, as I was saying, we're updating the way we collect data for our interactive traffic map. But that's also, as I wanted to sort of tie that back to the last question that you had, was it's not only going to be about traffic, but it's about OC Transpo and transit. It's going to be about cyclists and bike lanes and when they're under construction or repair and so forth, and being able to tie all of that information together. But that's all going to be available through our open data platform.
I think that's you know, that's obviously a key consideration of mine. I'm very focused on making this data available to people because it can generate some very creative exercises. To that point, I also just want to make sure that we're not necessarily reinventing the wheel in some instances. A few years ago, I paid a very small sponsorship to Bike Ottawa, who mapped the city and mapped all of the traffic signs to create their level of traffic stress map. And if we can leverage some of the data that's already been created in open form, that would be good.
Absolutely. I mean, what, you know, our philosophy is where the information is available, it doesn't really matter where it comes from. It needs to be of quality. We need to make sure that it's maintained and accurate, because that's the one thing that can throw you down the wrong path. But you know, if there's a data source that's available out there that can actually provide us information, we're happy to pull that in.
I mean, ideally, volunteers wouldn't need to do it to be maintained at the city's cost, obviously. No, this is it's really exciting stuff, Omar. You know, I don't want to get too distracted by the fact that this technology may be focused on this mode of transit, et cetera. It's very early days, and all of what you're working on is going to be useful moving forward. So thank you very much for an exciting presentation.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. We have a few more speakers. Councillor Fleury.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, it is an impressive presentation on the use of data and technology. What I didn't hear, Omar, and I wonder if there's been some reflection there is in relation to reporting. So, you know, when you look at the 311 data, a lot of it's seasonal around potholes or winter maintenance around slippery roads. So do we see a future for that piece to simplify our operations and to maybe automate some of our responses to our network?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing that's a challenge, is having a concerted, and I'll call it a data warehouse for lack of a better word, where all the different data pieces come into a location where we can then actually use that to I'll differentiate data from information, right? So data is this is the temperature, this is the wind speed, and so forth. The information is deriving all of that to say, oh, it's going to be a beautiful Saturday to be able to go out for a barbecue. And that actually is the sort of information. So being able to take all this information to generate KPIs, so we can actually monitor how travel is operating on our arterials or in a particular community, by using all the different data sources that we want to be able to start to pull in. It's very early days still, but the opportunities are being able to mine that data to be able to make better operational decisions, and also make that data available to yourselves as decision makers as to what we want to do for our community.
Do we see legal environments or challenges as it relates to, say a transit operations was to put a particular monitoring of potholes, or an individual, vehicle operator, say, was willing to put that pod where every time there's a particular movement, vertical movement on their driving, we know there's a certain depth of a pothole or so on. Has there been legal involvement in seeing that through? Because I know where we want to go. I see the benefits of it. I'm not sure I understand what are those limitations.
Yeah, I'll be on. Legal hasn't been involved at this stage, and as I said, it's really early days. The information that we're typically getting are counts of information, whether it's pedestrian counts, cyclist counts, and the regular automobile vehicle counts and speeds. But the ability to gather more information in a privacy. What I'd like to use is, there's a term that the former privacy commissioner of Ontario uses, which is privacy by design. So it's a focus on collecting the data that you need, but the data that adopts and adheres to the maintaining the privacy of the individuals who are out there on the road. And if you don't need to collect that data, you don't need to collect something specific, you're able to gather that information. And so the privacy issue is taken care of, but we haven't involved legal at this stage.
Okay. Has there been engagement with, say, OPS, for example, on the speeding front? Because as a councillor, we're always there supporting our community, but ultimately, if the data drove the enforcement around where actual speeding is occurring, it would, if we would be able to automate that, we could be a little more removed from the political involvement of enforcement, if you will, if any.
Those discussions haven't been had yet, because we don't have the real speed information available to us to be able to make a true decision. We might have it for one spot location. Certainly the automated enforcement devices that we have out there now are able to collect information and be able to identify that, but we don't have that on an aggregate where we could actually provide that to OPS for making operational decisions on where enforcement is required.
Okay. Oh, I see Phil wanted to jump in.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that although we don't have it in this area, we do work with OPS very closely. So they do get all our data from the speed boards. They get the data from when we do traffic counts and traffic speed studies. And then when they get complaints, they have a database that they can go to check to see if there's issues there based on the data, and then also enforce at specific times. So that if we know, like say at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, that's when the highest speeds are, they'll go at that point, versus at 7 in the morning when there's either not much traffic or not a lot of speed. So we are working closely with police on that, and we continue to do so.
Yeah, it's exciting to see technology not simply being an aspiration, but really coming into practice. What sort of direction would you need if we wanted to pursue what I'll describe as operational improvements, say the example of the pothole? So if we wanted the team to advance an automated pothole reporting efforts, like how would we go about as committee to advance that in the work plan?
Well, I think we would have to work with Public Works, Environmental Services, and so we can take that back. I can talk to Eileen Gontier and see what they're doing today, because we are in different departments and we sort of have a high level of what they're doing, but to see if this is something specific and how we can assist them from that perspective. So
Okay.
I can take that back, and we can get back to you.
Yeah. The potential of data is impossible, like it's unreal, right? So I really want to thank you for your presentation. I think it's great. I want to see how we can operationalize this, and I know the chair is interested in the way we can minimize potholes and automate potholes. So let's take that offline.
Yeah, and I'll just mention that, I mean, I think part of the work to update the TSM action plan is to actually meet with all the different departments and understand what data they're collecting and what data they might need, both now and into the future, so that we can actually provide a nice, good 10-year plan as to how to move forward. So, thank you.
Great, thanks, Councillor. You're quite correct. Potholes and speeding are definitely the #1 calls we all get. So, Councillor Hoodley.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Omar, for the great presentation. I just have a couple of questions for you. These like, for example, the intersection in Kanata, that's two-way communication, correct? You're collecting the information from the vehicles, the speed, the whether they're stopped or moving, whatever. But is there information going back to the vehicles as well?
Today, no. But for the car of the future, I'll say the connected and automated vehicles, right? We are actually broadcasting out, for example, the information with regards to the traffic signal status. That sort of, I think maybe your question also ties in a little bit more to the work that we're looking at pursuing on 174 and being able to take that information to be able to provide that information out to travelers as to, for example, the speed and or the travel time on March Road, for example, to get to 417. That's stuff that we're sort of in the process of working on and putting together, and certainly understanding, where people are traveling and what information would be relevant to them is what we intend to move forward with, so that we can provide that in a two-way direction for sure.
Okay, the future would be to the vehicle itself, but in the midterm, if you will, you're talking about putting the communication back out, like on the big boards that overhang the highway, that kind of thing is what you're looking at.
That's one. I guess the other option that we have been sort of looking at is how can we do that with mobile phones, and a lot of cars nowadays, and people have, for example, Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, and ways that we can actually tap into that. So there's a number of different fronts. There's a lot of moving parts, but it's certainly the ability to get the information to the public or to the traveler is important, because then they can make their decisions as to how to get to their destination more effectively. And whether it's the phone ahead to say, I'm going to be a few minutes late, or something of that nature, even that is important for us to be able to get that information to the residents.
Thank you. And to take that even further out, to follow up on Councillor Leeper's comments, if you weren't to try to focus on getting that information out to the vehicles around there, if you were just trying to get it to a pedestrian or a cyclist, how would that happen? How would you send it out to a pedestrian?
Also, I guess it depends upon what the operation that the pedestrian is undertaking. For example, it could be a beacon that alerts them that there's a large truck that's coming that may run the red light, for example. There's a lot of sort of technology that's at the cusp that people are trying out different things, and our work with Area X.0 and with other organizations allow us to sort of get a sense of what's out there in the industry. Not everything will work out, and that's why we undertake the idea of pilots, so that we can test something before we actually want to deploy that in a larger front. But if it could just be like a mobile app that goes to a pedestrian that says, the sidewalk up ahead is closed, and that could be as simple as that.
Thank you. I think it wasn't mentioned in the presentation, but it was raised. You are doing a lot of testing with buses in the city as well, right? We have the only, as far as I know, the only bus testing track for autonomous buses in Canada. Is that correct?
Yes, we certainly are working, or OC Transpo has been working with Area X.0 to test different opportunities. We're working with them to identify and understand what the technology is, because it's, for example, something as small for these automated shuttles, something as small as the lane being a little too narrow will prevent them from wanting to move forward, because they have such safety protocols that if they don't have, maybe it's a half meter, or some of them might require a meter width, that it will stop and will ask and prompt the user or the operator to actually move forward. And if going into the future, someone who's parked a little bit off of the shoulder or off of the curb actually may interfere and impact, and that will come back to how we design our roads, the widths of the roads, and where we can allow these different vehicles to operate. So there's a lot of moving parts in that respect too, but we're certainly working to identify technology and how we can use it best.
Okay, thank you. I think that's, again, to Councillor Leeper's point about focusing on public transportation, I think that's one we've done a lot of discussion about how that would look out here in Kanata, because that's where the vehicles, the technology for the vehicles is being produced, and a lot of the testing is taking place here or over in Barrhaven. So looking at how that would apply to the roads, you've raised a really good point, is that we either have to have a dedicated track for these autonomous vehicles if we're going that route, or hopefully, if they're popular enough, we could actually take a lane of the road and designate it like we do today for bus lanes. We could actually designate those lanes for autonomous vehicles and move more people around. Correct?
Well, yeah, but I would say that one of the things is the technology is moving forward, and so today the technology is, plays it safe as to how to navigate around, someone who parked a little bit out of the road. Some of the technology and some of the systems don't allow it to make that adjustment and maneuver shift over a little bit off of its planned center line. But that's moving forward as companies feel and identify how to adjust that shuttle, make that migration and alleviate or get around that obstruction. As that technology moves forward, we may not have to worry about some of these other kind of considerations, like needing a dedicated lane, for example. So. Correct.
And one other part I want to touch in on here is that infrastructure that you showed in that intersection. That's for the pilot, but help me understand, if we were to expand this to other intersections, say we do a whole community to start with, would that be the infrastructure needed at each of those intersections, or would it be smaller once you get out of the test mode?
So the Kanata Smart intersection is really a test environment, a real world test environment. So after we've been able to validate the equipment at the Area X.0 private track, we and our staff feel comfortable with the safety considerations of the devices. We put it out there at that intersection, but that's really going to allow for everything and anything that we want to test at that location. And so it really depends upon, what is the goal or what is the technology that you want to apply in a community or around at a number of different intersections. It won't need to have necessarily all wind sensors, all, the precipitation sensors, because between one intersection and the other intersection, it probably doesn't make a big difference. But maybe speed and sensors will be required. So it really, it depends upon what what goals you want to achieve for deployment, I guess I'll say. But it won't require everything that's there at the Kanata Smart intersection for sure.
So two quick final questions on that. Do we have an idea of what that would cost? What we would be looking at to roll that out to a community, to the whole city? That idea? Do we have any idea of what it would cost us to scale up?
Well, so one of the things, because we are really, we want to make sure that we provide an environment, but it will also make sure that we're maintaining the safety of our own traffic network or traffic signal network. We've actually implemented a separate cabinet for third-party devices to be able to test it in, as well as a separate pole for them to be able to test it in. So, again, it really depends upon the device. Like if it's some speed sensors that are out there to determine speed in and around at a community or through an intersection, it's a bunch of internet cable, plug it into a device that would be able to be broadcast out. So, it may be $5,000-$10,000 for one piece of equipment. But another piece of equipment like a camera that's doing AI, that's identifying where people are and walking, that might be $50,000 to $100,000. So unfortunately, it's hard to really kind of give you a hard number as to,
No, you gave us a good picture. You gave us a good picture, so it'll depend on what the requirements are. My last question to this was, in other cities that are working on this around the world, I've noticed that some of them are putting the specs out there as to what the sensor would look like to, say, for example, gather the speed of cars or that kind of thing. And they're letting the community build these sensors, and then the municipality installs them. Do you envision us getting to that point, say, within the next 5 years, where we could actually involve the community in developing the sensor network?
Well, so I guess I'll say in some ways we are already doing that in our working with Invest Ottawa and Area X.0, because anybody who wants to build the technology that wants to be able to test that and develop a product can actually do that, and working with Invest Ottawa, get the necessary support to be able to build a business around that. Because I mean, I don't expect that someone will want to do this as a hobby, but not actually pursue it even farther. But we are through the Area X.0 test track, we can actually properly run through the testing, validate how it works, and support them to make sure that they understand some of the nuances, for example, of deploying in a real world and municipal environment, and be able to support them in that way, and be able to move forward.
Okay, thank you, Omar, again for the presentation, and thank you, Chair, for allowing the questions.
Absolutely. We have a couple more speakers now. Councillor Menard.
Thanks very much, Chair. And just two quick questions. I'll try to not be too long. The first is around, and great presentation, by the way, really interesting to see some of this technology come to work and potentially be implemented. I was interested on the revert reds piece. You had gone over that. I'm wondering if you can go into a bit more detail about how that would work, if it's possible to roll that out. What kind of intersections would we see that at? Because it's a continuing problem in our city, revert reds, and just really interested in more of how that might work.
Yeah, so I appreciate the question through you, Chair. I have to admit, I'm not an expert in this field. I'm not sure if we have someone who, either Stu or someone else who actually is working directly. What I can tell you, I can give you a higher level overview for sure. So what essentially happens is we have detectors at all of our intersections that actually identify whether there's a vehicle or a person or a cyclist present. And what happens is that our traffic signal system is actually really significantly advanced compared to a lot of other communities. For example, if you travel down to Florida or parts of California, it doesn't matter whether it's 2 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. No matter what, Main Street always goes red for a period of time to allow traffic on the side street. Our system actually has that intelligence built in, where if you drive around the city in the evenings now, you'll see the pedestrian countdown on the Main Street, and then it may revert back to a green light and a walk signal for the pedestrian on crossing the side street. And that's because the signal system has not detected anyone present who requires to take that left turn movement or move through the intersection. And so the amber lock system will essentially, once the signal gets to a particular point of time, it will automatically go through that next green light for the side street, which will prevent the red reverts kind of happening. I'm not sure if that answers enough of the question.
I would just add, in terms of where we're looking at implementing, I think, in discussions with yourself and other councillors, we have and we talked about this in the Road Safety Action Plan report that we brought forward back in 2019, is looking at facilities where we know there's always cyclists. So, at MUPs and pathways, and also on the road where you got bike lanes, and also, residential areas where we know there's cyclists there. So we are looking at that as in the presentations. We're just in the final phase of testing. We're hoping to roll this out later this spring, and we will be touching base with you and other councillors who would want to leverage this ability to look at potential locations, because we understand this is a concern. And the idea is basically, because the red, from what we understand and what we see, is that cyclists tend to depart when the light's gone from amber to red, and it's when they've and the issue is once the detection is no longer there, the light thinks there's no one there and it goes back to green. So we would do that lock at the end of the amber, because for the most part we don't see people leaving before the lights change from the amber to the red, and that would resolve that issue. So we will touch base with you, and we'll identify some locations based on the feedback, and you too, Councillor Fleury. We're always in contact with you. And then we will we'll have a discussion and look at that. And similar with the joint PEDS phase that is going to roll out at the same time, because they're both being tested through that. We'll work with you identify that's more the corridors. So I know like Main Street and Bank Street in your ward, Councilor Menard.
Yeah.
So we'll work with you on that.
Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Landry. Appreciate that. And yeah, that was the second issue was, and I just described it for committee. You probably have it in your neighborhoods as well. You're walking up to a light, you're pedestrian, you're walking up to a light, and you didn't get there quite in time to push the button, the beg button, but there was a car sitting there, and the car gets the green to go to make the, go through the intersection or make the turn. But the pedestrian light doesn't flick on at the same time. So you're stuck at the intersection while the car is gone, but the pedestrian light doesn't come on. So what we've been talking about with Phil's group and Phil's team is, can we update the technology so that when the car gets a green, there is a walk signal every single time as well. So that would eliminate the need to push that button, at least when a car is there. We've implemented other initiatives around removal of beg buttons, which is a bit different than what I'm talking about here. But in some cases, staff don't approve those, and so the green light to go through as an alternative. So Phil, did you say the spring, like this coming up, like this summer, or do you mean next year?
Yeah, we're expecting the next couple months. We're just,
okay.
I think the software has all been done. We're just doing our testing and to make sure that there's no other issues, but we would expect that later this spring we'll
okay.
Roll out.
All right, thanks so much, Chair. Appreciate it.
Great, thank you very much. And last on the board, Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was wondering about winter. I'm not seeing anything related to how these vehicles handle winter. And that requires a lot of complications for anyone who drives. So did I miss something?
No, you haven't missed something, Councillor, through your chair, sorry. We aren't, in some ways, we aren't actually working on the vehicles themselves. Where we want to deploy, for example, these low-speed automated shuttles, for example, it does need to go through a good, significant amount of testing in winter conditions. And there are considerations that a lot of companies who obviously have been working in the U.S. South, beautiful, wonderful sunny weather, they haven't had to deal with it. We're fortunate here in Ottawa to have ByWard QNX and their expertise in understanding how to operate in all the different weather conditions as well. But winter testing of all this type of equipment, even the computer AI, and being able to, as I said, if someone's wearing a white parka walking, does it actually recognize them? And if we're using that to actually count information or to track whether or not from a safety perspective, we need to be able to make sure that it can actually identify that in a winter storm or a blizzard kind of condition. So winter testing is important, and there's only so much things that I could talk about for sure in the presentation.
Okay, so it's not quite there yet, because it's a big category, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, like some of the technology has been used in, for example, in the mountain regions of France and in Switzerland, for example. So they do have winter weather conditions there, but we haven't had the chance to really go through and do a longer term testing of the technology yet.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Great, thank you for that. I don't see any further speakers, so I'll just add a couple of quick comments. First of all, what a presentation, whether it's fuel savings, which obviously helps save our environment from a safety perspective, the whole discussion around speeding. I'll just leave it here with one line from Timbuk3 that the future is bright, gotta wear shades. So thanks a lot, Omar, for all this tremendous work. And so on this presentation, is this presentation an item received?
Received.
Great, thank you. I'll just scroll down. That was the last item. There's no in-camera items. There has been no notices of motion provided, inquiries, nor other business. The next meeting will be June 2nd, 2021, and media availability will begin at 10:45. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you all.